Beginning our series of what we know about the Washington Commanders so far, talking about how Jayden Daniels has already proven himself to be the best quarterback on the team. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday. Greatly appreciate you for coming through today. And every dayers greatly appreciate you coming through every single day. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. If you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this episode. Or if you want to, subscribe in both locations. On today's episode, Austin Ekeler, running back for the Washington Commanders, told Rich Eisen why he and the Washington Commanders were a match made in heaven this offseason. And I'm going to give you 3 contingency plans for the Washington Commanders in case the unthinkable but widely worried about situation occurs with rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels. First, however, we're going to go in depth on the current quarterback room, and I'm going to share with you what I've seen through rookie camp, OTAs, and minicamp that makes me confident that Jayden Daniels is already showing that he could be the best quarterback on this team. If you want to discuss that, anything on this episode or anything else Washington Commanders related, if you've got any questions, all you got to do is shoot me a text, and you can do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become a Locked On Commanders insider today, and from there you can send me any text messages you want, and I'll send you information, observations, bonus content, anything that we have all throughout the season, including the dreaded dead period, which we are in right now. So again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. No hashtags, no downloads, no apps, just your phone, my phone, and we can converse that way. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started on that. Jayden Daniels is already proving he's the top quarterback in Washington, and he's done it in just 7 practices. Of course, there's things that he's done outside those practices that help kind of feed into the fire of believing that he could be the number 1 quarterback already on this Washington Commanders roster. Certainly we all expect and essentially know, right, that he will have the opportunity to be the number 1 quarterback at some point in the near future, not the long-term future, but he's already done so. We're going to break down kind of a lot of things that we've seen during the rookie minicamp, OTAs, and of course the mandatory minicamp. This is to start our series of position groups. We're going to go position group by group, and we're going to talk about what we know, or at least what we think we know through the offseason so far. And I want to make sure that we all grain of salt this whole thing, right? So this is not a rookie of the year projection or an MVP projection or a playoff record projection. None of that. Just understand 7 practices. What have we seen? Why do we have the confidence in Jayden Daniels that we do already to be the top quarterback amongst Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll, and undrafted free agent rookie Sam Hartman out of Notre Dame? And for quarterbacks, we're looking at some key areas that are actually observable through these practices. So you already know, without pads, without full contact, without full game scenarios, there's a little bit of a limited scope of what we can actually evaluate. It depends on the position group, on how much we can evaluate, how much we can't yet evaluate. So when we get to the offensive line, it's going to be a lot more about kind of the mental ability, the dancing bear scenario, the fits and the matchups, and those types of things, that the more than it is the actual physicality of the position, right? Because we just can't observe that during this portion that we've already seen. But for quarterbacks, what we've seen already, we can observe arm strength. We can observe accuracy, touch, field vision, decision-making, second play ability, which is going to be really important. And then what we can't really observe fully anyway, we can observe a little bit, but not completely, mechanics. And we'll break down that a little bit more. There are certainly some mechanics that we can absolutely see, but I'll kind of tell you why I don't consider that a fully observable category right now. Competition level and toughness. Again, I'll kind of explain further why I say that's not fully observable right now. Pocket presence, rushing ability. Of course, we'll see a lot of that in training camp. Let's go back to the observable categories and start with arm strength. So I ranked all 4 of these quarterbacks, and unfortunately, some of these quarterbacks don't actually get to get ranked in each category. But in arm strength, I've got Jayden Daniels on top of this 4-man group. Again, Jayden Daniels, Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll, and Sam Hartman. I've got Marcus Mariota second right now. Sam Hartman is third. Jeff Driscoll is in 4th place. Accuracy, I've got Daniels, and then I've got Sam Hartman. I'm going to explain that here in just a second. Then Marcus Mariota and Jeff Driscoll. Now, the Sam Hartman second place ranking in accuracy, this is why I tell you in the beginning of this conversation, grain of salt this thing, because what are we talking about? We're talking about practices and we're talking about position drills. And when I put Sam Hartman above Marcus Mariota right there, there's not a lot of 11 on 11 opportunities that Sam Hartman is going to get. There's not a lot of 7 on 7. Certainly he's going to get some of them. But I'm really looking at these drills, and this is really just a vehicle for me to get to talk about Sam Hartman and how impressive he's been in some of these quarterback drills. You've certainly seen some videos. I've shared some practice videos with insiders, and people have been tweeting videos during these practices of the quarterbacks doing multiple drills using the 3-hole net. So there's a net that they've got 3 holes in, and depending on what hole they're told to throw the ball to, that's their target and all these things. You've got the trash can drills that they were having some fun with as well during the mini camps. And I'll tell you what, guys, Sam Hartman's ability to put the ball in the hole, which is typically a basketball term, but here we're going to use in football, is very, very impressive. Now, again, that's more so a vehicle for me to be able to share that with you, because I haven't seen Sam Hartman in these team drills enough to actually put him ahead of Marcus Mariota. So if you're freaking out about that, please calm down just a little bit. As far as touch is concerned, putting Marcus Mariota actually number one over Jayden Daniels so far. We've been able to see Marcus Mariota, I think, just put a little bit of touch on the ball more than Jayden Daniels. It's not a far stretch as far as who has more touch between the two quarterbacks, but I do think I give Marcus Mariota the edge there. Jeff Driscoll and Sam Hartman rounding it out. Now, that's the only place we're going to have 4 quarterbacks ranked, because we can talk drills and we can talk position groups and all that stuff. But when we come to these last 3, field vision, decision making, second playability, we're really only going to rank the 2, Jayden Daniels and Marcus Mariota, because they're getting the 11 on 11 reps. They're getting the lion's share of the 7 on 7 reps. And it's just not fair to try to rank those other 2 quarterbacks when they're not getting the opportunities to really be evaluated, even at this level where, again, we're admitting that we have a limited scope to actually evaluate them in, right? So field vision, I'm giving to Jayden Daniels over Marcus Mariota. In fact, Jayden is going to get the edge in all 3 of these categories: field vision, decision making, and second playability. Field vision, we've seen Jayden Daniels make a lot of smart plays, a lot of smart throws. When he's aggressive in a smart way. He's putting the ball where the defenders can't usually get to it. We have seen some interceptions, especially like red zone work where the clock is ticking down. But again, if you're talking about a situation where you're down 4, under a minute, no timeouts, it's score or lose, you got to put the ball in play, right? So you have to do those kinds of things. But when we are spread out, you're more on your own 30, moving down the field and things like that. You're seeing Jayden Daniels really see a lot of the field and see over the middle of the field, which I know is a big concern for people through the NFL draft process and the evaluation process, was how much was he going to be able to see the middle of the field. I'll tell you, he is seeing the middle of the field very, very well and putting the ball in very smart places, which goes into the decision-making process or portion of this. I'm definitely seeing, or we've seen during these practices, Jayden Daniels certainly make some rookie decisions, put the ball maybe in peril or maybe check down a little bit too soon, things like that. But for the most part, you're seeing really solid decision making. And again, I don't think it's if you want to call him actually tied on that situation or in that category as far as decision making, is you could probably do that. But I would give the tip of the cap to Jayden Daniels. Just really impressed with seeing how some of the decisions that he has made in these 11 on 11s really kind of shine. It really kind of stood out from an evaluation process. Again, remember Marcus Mariota getting the edge in the accuracy, because over the middle of the field, intermediate part of the passing game, we have seen Jayden Daniels consistently throw high. We do want to see him bring that ball down. I'm sure he wants to do that as well. So we'll continue to monitor that. I know that's something that during the NFL draft lead up was a big part of the conversation as well. Second playability, that's play breaks down. You have to extend it. You got to make a decision, roll out the pocket, manipulate the defense, do all those things. No surprise there that Jayden Daniels is getting the nod in that category. So right now I've got Jayden Daniels ahead in 5 of 6 of those categories. There's one where you can probably call it a tie. So he's ahead in 4 of 6. They tied in 1 of 6, and then Marcus has the nod in 1 of those 6. But either way, Jayden Daniels so far looking every bit the value that you would expect from a number 2 overall quarterback. Certainly looking like an athlete. Certainly looking like he's in control. Which again, we've heard from many players, many coaches, that he's been able to kind of have that control of not just the playbook, but the huddle and everything he's doing on the field. As far as the mechanics, the reason I have the mechanics as far as throwing motion, arm slot release, follow through, and footwork, all that stuff is obviously you can see some of it. The problem and the reason I don't want to sit here and say here's where I think each quarterback ranks in that is because when the bullets are live, when the competition is live, even in joint practices, when the quarterbacks can't be hit, but there's still an opponent on the other side of the field, that's when that's going to be more important. And I want to come back and evaluate that at that point in time. Competition level and toughness, again, you're going friend on friend. There's no contact, there's no pads, there's no hitting. I don't doubt either man or any of these guys' competition level or toughness. I think that all of them have a very good level of competition in them, or competitiveness in them, and toughness as well. But again, it's just not something you can see enough to fully evaluate. Pocket presence, same thing. It's one thing to look calm and statuesque and stand tall and all that stuff in the pocket when nobody can hit you. I want to see what they look like when they can be hit. And then rushing ability. Look, I think we would all probably put Jayden Daniels on top of Marcus Mariota on that one, right? But again, not something that we can see. So I want to keep this as organic to the process as possible. Of course, we're going to see a lot more once training camp gets underway. We will certainly have training camp primers. What I want to see out of this group, each member of the group, as we get closer to that date at the end of July, rather, and especially when we get to those joint practices and the preseason games. But what if the unthinkable happens? I don't want to say, I don't want to say it out loud, and I want to speak it into existence. But the word starts with an I, ends with injury, which pretty much sounds like the actual word, right? What if the unthinkable happens to Jayden Daniels? I know some of you don't think it's actually that unthinkable. I've got 3 contingency plans for Washington should that happen. That's coming next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by FanDuel. And I love sports. You love sports. We love them so much, we never actually want them to stop it as the playoffs wind down in other leagues. Sports start to wind down. We get fewer games, and the sports just aren't sporting the way that we want them to, especially the way that I like them to all year round. But FanDuel lets me and will let you keep the sports going whenever you and I want. All you got to do, open the app and dream up any bets you can anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And on Sunday, I took advantage of a 50% same game parlay boost for the Texas Rangers and Baltimore Orioles game. So if you were with me on Sunday, you could have taken advantage of that as well. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon, find out what the bonus or the deal is for today, and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen, your first view today and every day. Every dayers, thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Especially, thank you for joining me here in Kansas in a Marriott hotel. We're on the road, as some of you already know. So thank you for coming through as we're doing this. We will continue to churn out as many episodes, much content on Locked On Commanders as we can throughout the summer as we kind of move through this process of getting training camp and all these things. In the meantime, if you're looking for even more sports coverage, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories, can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we talked about kind of breaking down the evaluations of the quarterback room as much as we could through rookie camp, OTAs, mandatory minicamp. And I know we talked a lot about the leadership that Jayden Daniels has shown, right? The initiative that he's shown, coming to work early and getting the walkthrough zone with Luke McCaffrey and other players and getting some tape study in, and his command of the playbook, his command of the huddle, and how impressive that's all been. But I wanted to really kind of focus on the on-field stuff, right? I want the arm talent and all those things. And I think when you combine all those things together, and certainly Jayden Daniels maybe getting a little bit of a rookie boost, right? You expect to see some of the things maybe that we've seen from him from, say, a veteran. So the fact that he's a rookie and already demonstrating some of these things, perhaps giving him a little bit of boost, that would certainly be fair. But at the end of the day, we all know the plan is for Jayden Daniels to be the starting quarterback of the Washington Commanders. Whether Dan Quinn and his staff announced that before the first regular season game, the couple of days before when they really have to activate or finalize everything, whenever they decide to do it, that's the expectation. But of course, there is also a worry and anticipation out there from some people, a lot of people, that Jayden Daniels is not going to be able to withstand the punishment that NFL football brings with it. And of course, the last time the Washington franchise picked a quarterback number 2 overall, it was another mobile quarterback, another Heisman winning quarterback, and he ended up injured. And those injuries really kind of helped derail Robert Griffin III's career. There were some other contributing factors there as well that I don't think we have to worry about with Jayden Daniels as much. But certainly that is a concern that people have. And so I wanted to dive into a little bit. What happens if this team does have to go forward without Jayden Daniels due to something like that? The Indianapolis Colts went through it last year with Anthony Richardson. He was looking pretty solid as a rookie, pretty strong, battled through some things. Ultimately, they ended up shutting him down for the season. He's back this year, and they're hoping to get a full season out of him. So here's some courses of action, right? Because every team has to have a course of action, contingency plan. What do we do if this happens? What do we do if that happens? You can't what if everything, but who your backup quarterback is, what happens if you lose your starting quarterback, is one of those contingencies that I feel like every single team at least has to have a conversation about at some point in time. Not probably right now, right? But closer to the regular season, have a package of plays for your backup and those types of things, or at least have the conversation. So, course of action number one: if Jayden Daniels goes down for any period of time, or if he gets shut down for the season, put on IR. And again, as we always do, knock on wood that we hope that doesn't actually come to fruition. Course of action number one is obviously going to be Marcus Mariota, right? The veteran quarterback, former number two overall pick himself of the Tennessee Titans, ends up eventually going to the Raiders, then the Falcons, then the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where he was last year as a backup to Jalen Hurts with offensive coordinator, then offensive coordinator of Philadelphia, Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson comes over to Washington to be an assistant head coach, offensive pass game coordinator. Marcus Mariota comes over with him, veteran leader in the locker room, veteran leader in the quarterback room. Really kind of has a mentor role for Jayden Daniels, and seems to be serving it very, very well. He's obviously going to be the first course of action if Jayden Daniels has to miss any time or a significant amount of time as a starting quarterback for the Commanders. Marcus Mariota will step in, but there are some other courses of action as well that this team could take that I would actually say they should at least consider taking or doing if this were to happen. And really, all of them stem off of Marcus Mariota being the starter. I'm not going to sit here and try to be hot take-ish or clickbait-ish and say, oh, well, Jayden Daniels goes down. They're gonna go trade for JJ McCarthy or something crazy that would never actually happen. So Marcus Mariota, I think very clearly will step in as a starter if Jayden were to go down. However, you still have to then have a new contingency plan for a second quarterback. And if you watch the 53-man roster projection episode that I dropped late last week, then you already know I've got Sam Hartman making this roster as a third quarterback. I know some of you don't agree, and that's perfectly fine at this stage in the game. But do you want Sam Hartman, the undrafted free agent rookie, being your second quarterback? Do you want Jeff Driscoll being your second quarterback? And for me, if you come to the situation where Jayden is shut down for the year, that's kind of the conversation we're going to have with this. I think course of action number two, which is kind of course of action / number one behind Marcus Mariota, is to go pursue Ryan Tannehill. And of course, this is assuming in all these courses of action that he's still available, right? But Ryan Tannehill, right now at the time of this recording, still available, still out there. Not the most dynamic quarterback, anymore. Not the most accomplished quarterback, certainly, but very experienced veteran guy. And if this situation comes to fruition, he's still out there on the open market. Certainly a guy who would probably just be looking for an opportunity to be on a team, be around a coaching staff, get in the room and just show everybody I'm a teammate, I'm a team player, I'm a guy who can come in, be a contributor to wins by being a mind in the room and another set of eyes on what's happening around the organization. And then if Marcus Mariota were to go down, knock on wood again, that doesn't actually happen. You have a veteran quarterback ready, waiting in the wings, who has some experience. You get him in there, and obviously, hopefully it's not a bang bang situation, but you get him in there, you get him some experience, and you have a guy that, again, not going to probably lead you to the Super Bowl, but could potentially help you win some games. And I know there's always going to be fans, and there's probably already some out there listening to this or watching this saying, no, you don't do that. At that point, you just want to tank and get the highest draft pick you possibly can. And in that case, you maybe go a little bit less experienced, maybe a little bit younger. I'm looking at quarterbacks like Jarrett Stidham out of the Denver Broncos organization, or Nick Mullins out of the Minnesota Vikings organization. Jarrett Stidham, soon to be 28, so he's not a spring chicken necessarily, but he's a little bit younger, a little bit on the lesser experienced side. Denver Broncos' future seems to be Bo Nix, whether that's early or later in the season. And again, this is all contingent on when this situation would need to pop up and come up. But Jarrett Stidham is certainly a player that at least one organization thinks could actually compete for starting reps. But they're also a team, the Denver Broncos, who need a lot of work on their roster. So if you were willing to give them a seventh, a sixth round draft pick, maybe you give them a fifth, they send back a sixth, right? You swap some better draft capital. The Denver Broncos might be in a situation where they say, look, we'd love to have the solid backup quarterback, but we'd love to have the future draft capital even more. And that could be an area where they go. Nick Mullins of the Minnesota Vikings is another situation similar to that. He's actually 29 years old, so he's a little bit older. Adam Peters, the general manager for the Commanders, very familiar with him from their days in San Francisco together. So that could be another option that you bring in there to be that second quarterback again behind Marcus Mariota, because again, as we all know, Marcus Mariota would be the number one quarterback contingency plan for the Commanders should Jayden Daniels go down for a significant period of time. So again, hopefully we don't have to go there, but this part of the conversation, wrapping up minicamp, wrapping up OTAs, just kind of talking about the situation, just like the 53-man roster projection, more about understanding where we are with the Commanders roster today than it is about actually predicting things that will happen, because certainly we don't want to predict a Jayden Daniels injury to actually come to fruition. So if any of these courses of actions has to be used, obviously running backs Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler are going to have a significant increase in their roles on the offense as well. So it's a good thing that they and the Commanders are a match made in heaven. That comes up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Commanders and this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you're like a lot of other people, you might compare your life to the life of others from time to time. Social media may play a part in that, and wishing your life looked like someone else's can prevent you from seeing the positives in your own life. Comparison is a thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives from time to time. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. And it isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you need to, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/locked on today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for coming through every day, or thanks for coming through every single day. Austin Ekeler, running back for the Washington Commanders, former Los Angeles Chargers veteran running back, recently went on the Rich Eisen show. And you might have heard already, talked earlier or more recently. He's done a lot of interviews this offseason. He's a guy who really likes to get out there and just talk with people, right? A very open player in today's NFL. And he kind of talked about how there was just this misalignment. I think that's the word that he used, misalignment with Coach Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. Said that they wanted a back that could hand the ball off to 300 times in a single season. He just isn't that back. He knows he's not that back. And that's honestly a very impressive amount of self-awareness, because a lot of players in that situation say, yeah, man, give me the ball as much as I can. I'm going to go out there and do my best with it and basically try to earn that bigger paycheck and do all these other things. So it's actually kind of impressive that Austin Ekeler was willing and self-aware enough to say, all right, you want a guy who can be your bell cow. You want a guy who can just tote the rock over and over and over again. You look at what Michigan and the Wolverines did under Coach Harbaugh last year. They ran the ball a ton. As many criticisms as there was for about Jayden Daniels in the draft process, J.J. McCarthy, one of the biggest ones for him coming out of Michigan was he barely threw the ball in college. So how can you really fully evaluate him? Well, it's because Harbaugh liked to run the ball. So they want to do that in Los Angeles, obviously. Use that information for your fantasy football drafts coming up as best as you can. But Austin basically came to Washington realizing that he needs to be in a system that's not going to ask him to carry the ball 300 times. And he recounted some of those, or restated some of those stories with Rich. But he also said another piece of information, quote, I know I'm going to be one of those backs that's going to catch it and run the ball. And then when I've had the most success, it's been usually when we have some type of tandem where we have someone else that can relieve me, end quote. Now, no disrespect to Austin Ekeler, but I think in this scenario here in Washington, he's going to be relieving Brian Robinson Jr. more than Brian Robinson Jr. is going to be relieving him. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Who the first running back is on the field, it's going to matter in who, quote unquote, gets the start and who's the starter and all those things. But at the end of the day, it really isn't going to matter. Both of these guys are going to touch the ball. They're going to touch the ball a significant amount of time. But what's really great about the situation is that you have an opportunity to pair a young running back in Brian Robinson Jr., who's shown a lot of potential, has not been used the greatest in the 2 years that he's been in the league so far. But with the opportunities that he has had, he's been very impressive comparatively, right? One of the top backs in yards per carry, one of the top backs in yards receiving per reception, all of those things. And then you have a veteran, Austin Ekeler, who is part of this effort to bring leadership into the organization, not just in the coaching staff, not just in the front office, but also in the locker room. But he's a leader, veteran player in the locker room who's coming in and saying flat out, I need a running mate. I need to be part of a duo. I don't need to be a singular player. And we already know that B-Rob is fully on board with that, because he and Antonio Gibson spent all offseason last year, all training camp last year, just glowing about how they could play off of each other and contribute to each other and be complementary with one another. We expected to see Antonio Gibson in much more of a receiving role than we actually did. In fact, we actually anticipated at one point in time that we might see him motion into or line up split as a receiver, as it were. Of course, a lot of those expectations or anticipations or possibilities never actually came to light. So we'll have to see how good of a job Cliff Kingsbury does. But Eckler also talked about Coach Anthony Lynn, who's a former head coach with the Chargers organization, and Eckler credits Coach Lynn for being essentially the catalyst for his success in the National Football League. So there's no coincidence that Coach Lynn comes to Washington, Austin Eckler comes to Washington. If Austin Eckler knows he's not a guy to tote the rock 300 times in 1 year, so is Coach Lynn knows that too. And I guarantee you, both of them have told Coach Kingsbury, Coach Quinn the same thing. So that's not going to be the plan. The plan is going to be a lot of dual running back situations. I wouldn't be surprised to see both of them on the field from time to time, things like that. So very exciting just to understand that you have a running back room, because I think more and more teams are going to this kind of duo set. Even like the San Francisco 49ers have a guy like Christian McCaffrey. He is the running back, right? But they have other backs that they do get involved from time to time. But then they also use guys like Debo Samuel as pseudo running backs as well, and extensions of the run game and all these things. So even the best in the business, and my soon to be number one overall pick in my fantasy football draft in my money league, even he is getting partners. He's getting help. He's getting additional ball carriers and touches to other guys. So you obviously want to see that. So it's a good sign for this team moving forward. Just another sign of this team really doing this thing together. And I think it's really great for Brian Robinson Jr. as well, because he's going to be out there understanding that he's got someone who's fully capable. And again, I put it behind him, right? You might want to call them side by side, but I think a very dynamic duo coming to help the quarterbacks that we talked to in the first part of this episode. So great words coming from Austin Eckler on the Rich Eisen show. Again, he's been on the Up and Adams show. He's been on all kinds of other shows. So Austin Eckler, there's no shortage of hearing from Austin what he thinks about this team, the future, and his role on it, if you really want to go out there and get it. That's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Come back tomorrow. We're going to look at another position group as we get through the week, talk about where they stand after rookie minicamp, OTAs, minicamp. We'll talk about some other possibilities with them as well, and we'll continue to talk about other news surrounding the Washington Commanders. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, just throw them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to sign up today. Don't forget to also check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.